Great Recession seems to have given way to a jobless recovery, although there may have been some hopeful signs in the recent dip in the national unemployment rate. Signs of economic life are beginning to stir across the country as well as here in our region, especially when it comes to commercial real estate. Alex Klatskin is a partner of Forsgate Industrial Partners, chair of NAIOP out of New York City. Richard Donley is general partner of Cranberry Business Park Associates, and everybody ready for the big NAIOP annual dinner here in our region. Another big event this year. Welcome. Good to see both of you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, well, I got to ask you the big question. You know, you've begun your term now as chair of NAIOP, which means you get to travel all across the country and get a perspective of what's happening. What is happening when it comes to commercial real estate?
Around the country, we're seeing the capital and credit markets open back up. Development is even starting to happen again. And we're seeing people expanding their spaces, which is great. The vacancy rates have stopped going up. Rents are now starting to turn around. And we think that the bottom is over and the wind may be at our back for the near future.
Now, how long was the bottom? How big a struggle has it been?
Well, I'm not an economist, thankfully, but I would say that the bottom did take us about 30 to 36 months.
Wow, which is long.
Which is very long. Yeah. Traditionally, the bottom is 6 to 12 months, but this one was particularly long and painful.
Now, we hear some pockets in the country have done better than others. Did you see that as well?
Certainly. The places which had big growth, Arizona, Florida, Texas, parts of California, they got hurt the hardest. Growth creates a lot of jobs, and when growth stops, they lose a lot of jobs.
And I would assume a big overhang in construction once the growth went away.
Clearly. And places that didn't have that growth didn't have the loss of jobs, which we saw. Pittsburgh being one of them.
Yeah, well, it's been a pretty good story for Pittsburgh. I mean, we've had a recession. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't fun, but it seemed to be a lot better than a lot of other places.
Well, it's been a great place to be. Our office markets didn't have all the issues that so many of them around the country had. We are seeing rents start to move up again. We have some very strong pockets of growth along the I-79 corridor. So we've been very fortunate. We've come through this very well.
Now, when you look at sort of the amount of overhang that exists in the country, how big a challenge is that going to be for the industry, just absorbing what was overbuilt before the bust?
On the commercial side, the overhang isn't huge.
Oh, really?
This was not a recession where we overbuilt. This was not a supply recession. This was a demand recession. In the housing market, it was a supply recession. We just plain built too much. But in the office market and in the industrial market, we really just had a problem of demand.
So you really feel then that can strengthen fairly quickly now and begin really to get back on its feet?
Absolutely. And the deliveries in the last 36 months were virtually zero. Nobody brought new buildings online. So those things aren't sitting out there as empty ghosts that we have to fill up.
Same sort of thing here? I mean...
Well, I think we're a little bit ahead of that curve. The hard thing now in markets like South Point, Cranberry, there is no space and tenants are being turned away. There is virtually no overhang of space. In Cranberry right now, our vacancy is less than 2%. Downtown, the Class A market is around 5 or 6% vacant.
Even in downtown Pittsburgh?
The Class A
Class
market.
A, okay.
Now there are other pockets. When you go to the Class B and C, it's a different story. But when we look at the kind of space that the corporations want and the larger users want, there are only about 2 large blocks of space left downtown in Pittsburgh. So we're really reaching the point now, even downtown, where you're pushing rents up, and you can see that rents are going to start moving up again. In South Point, in Cranberry, we're getting rents where we are building. I've been building spec buildings in Cranberry for the last 8 or 9 years, and it is economic. You can make money and create value in those markets. Like that, like South Point. So it is a good story.
That's amazing. Still something of an anomaly? I mean, this kind of strength in Pittsburgh?
I haven't heard the words no space in a while, but I think a lot of the markets are seeing the Class A space fill up quickly. Okay. They're seeing the B and C space linger, as was said. And we've also seen a little bit of new supply come online in the Class A space because all the firms that used to rent, say, 200 to 225 square feet a person, they're now down to 160 to 175 square feet a person. So that way, the market has created new space without having to build anything.
Cutting it up into smaller pieces?
Cutting it up into smaller pieces. You know, not every law firm partner has a big office anymore. Now only some of them have a big office. And I think that's made a big dent in the demand on space. But the B buildings, the C buildings, most of them are going to have to be converted into something else. The B buildings and C buildings will go residential. They may go into education. They may go into healthcare. But I don't see anybody out there today saying, please show me all the C buildings you can. That's what we're looking for.
That's interesting. So it really is, they're going to the quality, to the top of the market. When you're talking about this type of headquarters operation, those sorts of activities.
And the problem that creates when you start getting more people per square foot, or in the buildings, the problem that creates is the parking in the suburban buildings was never designed for that kind of a load. And so you have a problem because the older buildings don't have the parking. They typically don't have the mass transit in the suburbs. So you create functional issues with the existing stock of buildings.
Wow. This does begin to bode well for the construction companies and the rest of the industry, because it means some real construction and building of commercial spaces maybe just around the corner.
Yeah, the people who are doing tenant improvement work, doing interior fit outs, are very, very busy right now. And those people that will refit out the B buildings and C buildings once the A buildings get filled up, they're going to go from filling up A buildings to converting B and C into other things. I don't think we're going to see speculative construction except in 3 or 4 of the main markets in the United States anytime soon, though.
Okay. Well, fascinating stuff. Good to hear. The light may not be at the end of the tunnel anymore. The light appears to be upon us. Alec Klatskin from Forsgate Industrial Partners, the chair of NAIOP, and Dick Donley, Cranberry Business Park Associates. Thank you both so much.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And we'll be back in a minute with more of our region's business. Stay with us.